is mentioned in great part in the Bassiouni report. It's hinted at in the Bassiouni report. But it really would need to have all the major forces in the kingdom, even the ones I just mentioned, the very negative ones, because you have to have that to have national unity. You cannot just eliminate a whole group. But if you don't have a Shia, very advanced, educated Shia groups involved in the management of the country, if you don't have the same among the Sunnis and so on, you'll never get anywhere. And I think the royal family has to realize that this is absolutely necessary. Finally, and perhaps the most important part of my 3 points is there has to be a major effort by the leadership today to integrate all the sects into the forces, the military forces, the police forces, basically the forces of repression. You cannot have, it will not happen to have reconciliation unless one group accepts that it does not have the forces of repression and another group accepts that it doesn't. That's just not going to work this way. That reminds me very much of the reports we had when Washington was burning, in the 60s here. There was a report written, and one of the key issues of this report was you have to make the police forces and other forces have black people and white people working together. And we have to have that in Bahrain. If this does not happen in Bahrain, everything will fail. There's just no way out of that. So there is, as far as I can tell, there are enough people of goodwill in Bahrain to achieve that on both sides, on all sides. My main concern in my 3 point here is that I'm not sure the foreign forces will accept that. I'm not sure the Saudis want it. I don't think the Iranians want it. I'm not sure the Iraqis. We don't talk enough about the Iraqis, who are vital in Bahrain because of their influence on the Shia, and even to the U.S. So that's the fear. So how do we resolve this issue? Maybe it's to get these parties together, get them to agree to not interfere, and then try to work on our 3 points: the recognition of the real constitutional monarchy, the formation of a national unity government, a real one, and an integration of all the sects in the armed forces. Let me just continue for those of you who are not as familiar with Bahrain. Some people are much more familiar here with Bahrain than I am or ever will be. But what's amazing about Bahrain and why we love Bahrain in many ways, anyone who's touched Bahrain, is the fact that it's an extremely small but extremely complex society. You have, of course, the royal family, and the tribals have been coming from Saudi Arabia via the Qatar, and they took over in 1776 and infeodated the Shia Baharnas, the people who were there. There has been a resentment that has never been really taken care of. The Brits really made sure that this feudal system changed, but it still has some feelings there. Then you have a very large number of Sunnis. You have the Arab Sunnis from Persia, the main merchants of the island, the Arab Sunnis from Arabia, and who are oftentimes called the Muharakis, and you have the Persian Sunnis, who are highly educated professionals in banking, and sometimes very pro-government, sometimes very anti-government, and you have many other groups of Sunnis from the subcontinent of India who also tend to be very strong and powerful merchants. What is perhaps a little more difficult today is that there has been a tremendous rise of the importance of the Muslim Brothers and the Salafis in Bahrain, which was not the case in the 70s or 80s. But now they are very, very strong. They're even in government. And that doesn't make reconciliation very easy at this point. Then, of course, we have what we oftentimes refer as the majority Shia. And yes, the Arab Shias have been the longest in Bahrain, although originally they're probably from Saudi Arabia. But they're close to the Iraqi schools of thoughts in terms of Shiism. Of course, you have Persian Shias, who are small in number but well-educated, active in trade, and they're in the banking business, among professionals. And of course, you have a number of other groups. You have Ismailis from the subcontinent. You have minorities, Jews, Christians, and Baha'i. These minorities tend to be closer to the central power because they're very dependent on the central power to stay there, to stay in Bahrain. There is one thing I'd like to talk very briefly about is we oftentimes talk, as Joost actually used the word, the majority Shia. And I've always thought that was the case. But lately, there's a new narrative being presented by the government and by many sites and by many folks. But the Sunnis are now claiming that they are the majority today. And the worst of all is there may be some truth to it. Why? Because, yes, there was maybe, a very large number of the Muharakis, the standard, the traditional Sunni Bahrainis are there, but there has been a very large number of naturalization of the Baluchis in particular, and the Syrians who were in the armed forces who have been given passports. Perhaps more worrisome is that the Bahraini government, or at least the royal court, makes very little difference between a tribal person in Bahrain and a tribal person in Saudi Arabia. So all of a sudden there has been reports, which I've been told, but you'd get somebody called Al-Dosari in Saudi Arabia receives a passport in the mail. A Saudi passport in the mail. That allows him or her to vote in Bahrain. Well, there are hundreds of thousands of tribals in Bahrain who have very first cousins and brothers and sisters and aunts living in Saudi Arabia. So if everybody becomes a Bahraini, then yes, you will have a majority Sunni. And that is a big problem. And I think it's probably more worrisome than just the Baluchis becoming Bahraini. So let me just give perhaps a very quick review of what I would say the opposition, which is mainly Shia but not only Shia, the opposition view. I think there has been one of the annoyance, and that's mentioned, of course, in the report, but it's mentioned in everyday life, is there has been a systematic exclusion of the Shia from the jobs in Bahrain and in the armed forces. And it's not new. I mean, I remember talking to a gentleman who was head of one of the very major firms in Bahrain in 1994, and he got a call from the prime minister telling him to fire all these Shia employees. Now, that was in 1994, and to his great credit, he said no. So, these things are not new. The opposition would see the problem as not a Sunni Shia, but a dictatorship of the tribals versus the majority. I think that could be pushed a bit, but the tribals, who tend to be the backbone of the Salafis and, of course, the backbone of the Al-Khalifas, have been strongly anti-Shia for a long time. But the opposition will say even the Sunnis are oppressed. And the fact that the royal family takes the best lands in the island and gives citizenship to the foreign soldiers, it really ultimately is taxing the Sunnis as much as it's taxing the Shia. The opposition will view the royals as fundamentally corrupt. There's some truth to that, and everybody knows whether we know or not we have to be a little bit careful on my statement here. Everybody will tell you the prime minister is the most corrupt person in the island. There's absolutely no proof of that, of course. But, this is the Middle East, and rumor is news. So, we have to know that's the case. Whether it's true or not, we don't know. But the fact is, there is a lot of corruption. The land deals where the royal family takes the best land, and that was public 3 years ago. It was on the Google Earth. You could see all the lands of the royal family. The landfill, Bahrain is expanding out at sea and basically taking the shore from the fishermen in the Shia villages. I mean, these kind of things are happening all the time. The Sunnis try to, according to the opposition, the Sunnis and especially the government seek to paint the opposition as stooges of Iran. You hear that all the time. Now, I'm not sure they're fooled by that. I don't think really anybody would agree that most of the Shia are really working for Iran, especially since they are Arabs and not Persians. But it does get the US and the Saudis to really rile up and support the government. The government is manipulating all information to paint the opposition as just Shia, pro-Iranian, and unwilling to compromise. And there is some truth to their point, of course, but it is, I think, vastly overblown. The real power on the island is not with the king. And I think the Der Spiegel article 2 days ago of the interview of the king by Der Spiegel